Okay, so this is our first video notes for Chapter 7, and today we're going to be talking about ratios and rates. You're going to be asked to put ratios into fraction form, and then we're going to be solving for unit rates. So today is a lot of vocabulary and new terms that you might not have heard of before, but I'm going to try and give you as many examples as possible so that way you understand what's going on. So this is going to carry over into everything that we do in Chapter 7, so it's really important that you understand what a ratio is and what a rate is. So if you have any questions, please let me know, but let's go ahead and get started. And there's a lot of writing I have to do here today, so bear with me because it might look like I'm a third grader. But let's start with a ratio. So a ratio is a comparison of two numbers with the same unit by division. So you can write a ratio or compare two things in two different ways when you're dealing with math. So the first way and the most common way is to write it as a fraction. When you write it as a fraction, and really when you write it as any of these forms, you have to remember to simplify it. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. But the first way you can write ratios is in fraction form, because it's unit by division, which is the same thing as fractions. The second way you could write them would be with a colon, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And then the third way to write it is to separate the two numbers that you're comparing by the word to. So let's go ahead and do an example so you know what the heck I'm talking about. So we're comparing two things, and they have to be the same things that you're comparing. So to give you an example, if I play basketball, I would make 6 free throws or 6 shots out of 10 shots. So that is totally not true. I'm a terrible basketball player. So this is comparing how many I make, how many baskets I make out of how many total baskets I take. So we're comparing those two things, and they're the same things. They're both baskets that I'm throwing. So let's write it 3 different ways. So if I were to write it as a fraction, it would just be 6 over 10. But you have to make sure that you simplify that, so it would really be 3 over 5. So if I make 6 baskets out of 10 baskets, it's like I'm making every 3 out of 5 that I take. So it's the same comparison, it's just simplified. So I'm going to use this simplified fraction from now on. So if I write it with a colon, it would just be 3 to 5. And if I write it with 2, it would just be 3. Oop, that is not a 3. Sorry about that. So it would just be 3, and then the word 2, 5. So 3 to 5, 3 to 5, 3 to 5. So just a couple different ways you can write it, and unless I specify what you're supposed to write it like, you can really choose your favorite there. Okay, so those are ratios, comparing two things with the same unit. So let's talk about the next vocab term, which is a rate. So a rate is a bit different. It's still a comparison. So we're still comparing. But this time, instead of it being the same unit, it's going to be different units of measure. So up here, with our ratio, we were comparing free throws to attempts. So baskets I made out of total baskets that I shot. But with a rate, it's different. You're still comparing things, but we have different units here. So for example, you would be comparing miles per hour or miles per gallon, dollars per pound, cents per ounces. So we're still comparing things, but they're different units. So that's the difference with rates and ratios. So let's do an example. So a rate expression for the snowfall of 14 inches in 8 hours. So we're still going to write it either as a fraction or with a colon or a 2, but you have to make sure that it's simplified. So a rate expression would be 14 inches over 8 hours. And notice what I did differently for rate. Since it's different units, you have to make sure that you write the units there so we know what you're talking about. So if we were to simplify it, it would be 7 inches in 4 hours. So it's the same thing. For every 7 inches that we get, 4 hours has elapsed. Okay? So just different because I have to have those units. Now, a third difference here is with unit rate. So unit rate is when we're comparing two things that are different, but we need a denominator of 1. So let's look back at this same example. If we get 14 inches in 8 hours, what if I wanted to know how many inches it would snow in 1 hour? There's a way to do that, and let me show you an example. So I'm going to start with 14 inches in 8 hours. But I want to know how much it's going to snow in 1 hour at that rate. So what you could do is a couple different things, but I think the easiest thing to do is to divide the top and the bottom by this 8 hours. So I'm going to divide the bottom by 8 and the top by 8. Because, the 8 divided by 8 is going to give us the 1. And then we have to figure out what 14 divided by 8 would be, and this is where you got to pull out your calculator. So if we do 14 divided by 8 should be a decimal. So it's going to snow 1 3/4, so 1.75 inches per hour. So 1.75 inches per hour. Okay? So we've got ratios comparing the same thing, rates comparing different things, and unit rate is just figuring out how the comparison, it's terrible guys, sorry, for 1 hour. All right? So what we have here now is a bunch of examples. I'm going to do one of each probably, and then make sure you fill out the questions below this. I'm going to ask you to do all of the second examples here to make sure that you guys are understanding. So the first example is express each ratio as fraction. So we have 18 out of 45. It doesn't give us any units or anything like that. So since it's saying it's a ratio, I'm assuming that these are the same comparison of what it's asking. So if you type that into your calculator or figure out what you can divide by each, you will get 2 over 5. Okay, so really it's just simplifying fractions, which you can do with your ABC button if you have a calculator. This one you're going to need to do on your own, but remember you cannot have ratios that look something like this. You can't have mixed numbers because it's a comparison of two things. So you have to have it either as a proper fraction or an improper fraction, not a mixed number. So whatever you do, don't have any numbers like that, okay? All right, let's go to the second page, do some examples here. All right, now we're doing unit rate. So remember, unit rate is where we have a denominator of 1. So if I can go 323 miles on 17 gallons of gas, make sure you have your units because it's different. We need to figure out how many miles I can go on 1 gallon of gas. So to do that, remember you're going to divide everything by the denominator because 17 divided by 17 is going to give us that 1. So I'm going to do the same thing on top, and I'm going to do 323 divided by 17. And usually these are going to be decimals, so have your handy dandy calculator ready. So 323 divided by 17 would be, that's not decimal, 19 miles for every gallon of gas. Okay? I'd like you guys to try this one, just like you did before. Remember when it's cents, this would be 0.60 when you're typing it in. So try that on your own. We're going to do this example tomorrow in class, so please be ready to do that one. So good luck. Remember to answer those questions to get your points for watching the video.